Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Welcome, everyone. It is Friday the 13th, and you're listening to Paranormal Review Radio, the only radio show without commercials and with more great paranormal talk. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Anthony Gotti in New York.
And I'm Lucy Liebfried in Chicago. You are listening to one of the highest-rated paranormal radio shows on Blog Talk. No bull, no lies, just a true platform for everyone to share their knowledge and experiences. When searching for the truth, good communication is key. Now, the phone lines are open for questions or stories. The number to call is 661-244-9831. Make sure you press the number 1 to get into the queue. And don't forget the chat room is open, so you can post any comments or questions there as well. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Paranormal Review Radio. You'll find more articles, blogs, and full show uploads. And if you have specific questions, comments, or would like to be a guest on the show, email us at paranormal.review@aol.com. Now, sit back, get comfy, and prepare to open your minds. It's time for Paranormal Review Radio.
Today is Friday the 13th, and you can say that the simple notion of the date has spawned hundreds of years of uneasiness, fear, and belief in superstitions. Although many historians debate now this unlucky day came to be, many folklore researchers plant the birth of this phenomenon to the Last Supper in the Christian belief. Just the idea that a single day can create the masses to change the way we live, build, and create is not something that should be taken lightly. Think about it. Have you ever gone to a hotel and stayed on the 13th floor? Or have you ever sat in the 13th row on an airplane? How can a number define how we as humans live and work? As with all things, those who don't accept the phenomena surrounding 13 disagree with the reasons and blame people throughout history for designating a date and a number frivolously just to name the reason for their bad luck or tragedy. Regardless of how you feel about this date or number, you must not mock the belief system others may have about it. It is a personal belief that holds meaning and purpose in their lives. Whether you choose to walk under a ladder or not cross a black cat's path, you cannot change a cultural taboo. There's only one Friday the 13th this year, and for whatever it's worth, so let's unravel this day, the number, and a true murder story that is so eerily similar to Friday the 13th movie series, you're going to get creeped out and wish Jason Voorhees was real. So, Lucy, why don't you start off the show by giving us some history of Friday the 13th?
Well, actually what we have to do is we've got to start with the number 13 before we even add Friday into it. Mathematicians, scientists, they point to the number 12 as being a perfect number. And so the number that follows it, 13, is thought to be kind of unusual and odd. But people tend to think that 13 is unlucky. And there's two stories in history, in ancient history, that revolve around the appearance of a 13th guest and at two events. One is from the Bible. It's when Judas was the 13th guest to arrive at the Last Supper. And, of course, he's the person that betrays Jesus. Then we go over to the Norse. In their legends, evil and turmoil were first introduced into the world by the appearance of a treacherous and mischievous god Loki at a dinner party in Valhalla. He was the 13th guest, and he upset the balance of the 12 gods that were already in attendance. A lot of Christians do believe that Cain killed Abel on the 13th day of the month. We can even go to the Aztecs. The number 13 is the number of skies that they believe. The hair of the Ancient of Days had 13 buckles, and his beard had 13 wicks. Ancient Mexico, they divided time into cycles of 52 years, divided themselves into 4 periods of 13 days. Their weeks had 13 days. The Mayans, they divided their time into several cycles, beginning with the birth of Venus. And the cycle which would have begun August 13th, 3114 before Jesus, would end on December 22nd, 2012. According to them, that date corresponded with the 5th and last cycle of Earth and was supposed to end with the destruction of the world, which didn't happen, but maybe they were off a little bit. Then we can go back to 356 BD. There was a Macedonian king, Philip II. Now, they had this procession. It was a sacred procession that they had the 12 major Greek gods, 12 major gods of Greek mythology. Well, Philip decided that he was going to build a statue of himself and just kind of like add it in there. He went ahead and did that, added it to the procession, and he was assassinated shortly after that. The Druids, their sacred cord has 13 segments. Then if we go back to religion a little bit, today is May 13th, okay? It is the day that the Virgin Mary appeared to the kids at Fatima. And she appeared on May 13th. She appeared on the 13th of each month for several months. On July 13th, that's the day that she gave a vision to the children, the 3 children that had seen her. And in that vision, she gave them a vision of hell. And that kind of like to the Catholics, that kind of meant that kind of made them think that 13 is closely related to suffering and death. Even today, if the Virgin has appeared to like some seers, some clairvoyants, it's only on the 13th of the month. We can go to the Bible, the 13th chapter of Revelation. It talks about the Antichrist and the beast. The ancient Jewish Kabbalah, the number 13 is the meaning of the snake, the dragon, Satan, and the murderer. They do believe that there are 13 evil spirits. And if you move it forward a little bit, traditionally there's always been 13 steps leading up to the gallows. So pretty much the number 13 has been kind of just considered unlucky. It's like been the odd child. But then if you want to, now we're talking about Friday the 13th. So let's add the Friday to the mix, okay? Most Christians believe that Christ was crucified on a Friday. Cain is believed that he killed his, his brother Abel on a Friday, and they even think that the date was a Friday the 13th. Some biblical scholars believe that Eve tempted Adam with the forbidden fruit on a Friday. The Great Flood, the confusion at the Tower of Babel, they believe those started on a Friday. In the 14th century, even Chaucer, he hinted at Friday being a bad day, that bad things happened on that day. If you go to the year 1307, it was a Friday. It was in October. It was the 13th. Thousands of Crusader warriors were imprisoned. They were members of the Knights Templar, and they were accused of heresy, blasphemy, homosexuality. They were tortured. They were They were killed. In the Middle Ages, weddings were never held on a Friday. It was also a day that you would not set out on a journey. In medieval times, Friday was considered unlucky because it was Hangman's Day. A lot of sailors in old times considered it was bad luck to start a journey on Friday. So if you take Friday being a bad day and you add 13 to it, you've got the mix for a really scary day to some people.
But, you know, a lot of the data that you had just mentioned now in the history and such, particularly about religion, I don't know how anybody can make the assumption, you know, in biblical texts about Friday the 13th or Friday or the number 13. You know, I know that there are many connotations to the number 13 in the Bible, one of which was the 13 or the 13th member at the Last Supper, which you had just mentioned before, was Judas. And so many scholars sort of date this whole Friday the 13th idea and phenomenon back to that point. But as you dig deep into research, you do find some coincidences out there where, bad things have happened around the number 13. I'm sure if you digged even deeper, you'd find some things that, happened, tragedies and the like, happened on the 25th or happened on the 10th or happened on the Saturday. And that you may probably find more incidences like that than Friday the 13th. I find it fascinating, though, to try and unravel this whole mystery of Friday the 13th and how it pretty much spawned, as Ricky Ritchie just mentioned in chat right now, it spawned Camp Crystal Lake. It spawned the whole series of the movie Friday the 13th. And before that movie ever came out, obviously it had been a sort of, as I mentioned before, a cultural taboo. It had been a sort of the Western taboo, because if you look at Italy, for instance, their unlucky number is 17, and actually 13 is what they consider to be lucky, not unlucky. In Japan, the number 4 and 9 are their unlucky numbers, because when you say the number 4 or 9 in Japanese, it closely resembles the word death or mortuary, or I think something to that effect. So they connotate the 4 and the 9 to sort of creep them out, and 13 has no existence in their culture. So it is more of a Western feel to it. It is more of a and I guess a culmination of different things that have happened throughout history where people sort of hype things up a bit. And if you, as I mentioned before, if you don't want to put any sort of relation to what's happening bad in your life to you, you put it on a date or a thing. And so it just became natural that people, decided that 13 or Friday the 13th was something mysterious. In researching, there's a lot of, funny adverbs that I sort of picked up along the way, and one of which I just want to point out to everybody because this puts Lucy on the spot. I love doing this to Lucy.
Thank you for that.
One of the major, not major, well, I don't know if it's major or not, but I've heard it when I was growing up, and I know a lot of people in, my school system and, growing up as kids, I had heard this, that if you had 13 letters in your name, you were pretty much the spawn of the devil. And so if you count Lucy Liebfried and the letters in her name, it comes out to 13. So it only just, goes to confirm my beliefs in what I believe Lucy has become. And Lucy, in effect, is short for Lucifer. So there you go.
Well, you know what? Charles Manson also has 13 letters. Jeffrey Dahmer has 13 letters. Theodore Bundy has 13 letters. Albert DeSalvo has 13.
And so does Lucy Liebfried. So, we have to think about that a little bit and sort of take note and take a little bit of a breather.
But, be nice to me.
Hey, I already sold my soul. The idea, one of the things that you mentioned but sort of briefly went over, which I thought was pretty interesting, was the story about back in medieval times. And within medieval times, they pretty much designated Fridays, only Fridays, to hang people. Either they be criminals or enemies, what have you. They designated the date Friday. And so it sort of, I guess, impregnated the minds of people over the years, and sort of people had this disdain for the date of Friday, that day of the week. And so could that have been the sort of, I guess, I don't know, passing down, if that's such a thing in this genre here, that, you know, you talk about it so much, and you talk about it around your children, and then your children talk about it, and then they bring it up, and they talk about it with their children when they're grown adults. And so does it become passed down that way that, you know, ooh, Friday, everybody get in the house because, you know, there's going to be a hanging in Center Square? You know, so it has a lot of the history that you know, may have been designated for things like Friday, created this myth. I call it a myth, this superstition, this, you know, sort of superstitious phenomenon. And before coming...
I need to add something to that. You've got to remember, back in those times, okay, you didn't have television. You didn't have a whole lot of entertainment. Those hangings, those executions were the form of entertainment. They didn't exactly look at them in such a horrible light that we do. So again, you know, Friday being the hangman's day, that they called it because that was the week, you know, someone's going to get executed. That was entertainment. That was entertainment to them. So I think once maybe we read about it, I think that's still the Western world making it into something horrible, because back then it really wasn't that horrible unless you were the one that was getting executed.
Well, let's think about it right now. At the moment, everybody who's, you know, listening to the show right now and interested in this topic, what is it that you can remember or that may have triggered something in you to think, wow, that's Friday the 13th. Wow, I think that is something to fear. What is it that triggered that fear in you? I mean, obviously, growing up, nobody, I'm sure, or maybe not, I could be wrong, read it somewhere that Friday the 13th is a day of mischievous and unluckiness and dark and doom and evil and gloom. You know, maybe you have read that, but I believe most likely many people have heard this from friends or family. So what is it for you, Lucy, that you can think of that triggered, oh my God, it's Friday the 13th, I'm going to stay in, I'm not doing anything, I'm not going out, or, you know, I'm going to walk very slowly. What is it for you that did it?
Honestly, nothing. I've never had a fear of it. 13 to me has never been scary.
Well, no, I'm not saying about making it scary for you, but what is it that you understood it to be as being a fearful day? Was there anything that somebody brought up to you?
Not really. I mean, it just was another day. I noticed, okay, I will say one thing. When I started reading tarot cards, okay, in the tarot deck, the 13th card, the number 13 card, is death. Right. And that is the card that freaks people out no matter what. And basically, that card isn't a bad card. Death in the tarot means... I wanted to ask you... Okay.
Was that purposely, do you know if that was purposely done, that the death card was created as a number 13?
I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. I'm going to assume that it was, you know, again, going back to like all of the historical beliefs about the number 13. Because when you look at the tarot
surrounding
deck,
it.
Right. So I believe that it was purposely done. I mean, it really does. And to this day, when people get that card, they get scared. I mean, and it doesn't mean you're going to drop dead, but because 13 has such a reputation, and then also the name of the card is death, they take it as, someone sees it and it's like, whoa, So that's the main thing I've noticed. I've noticed that, 13 people kind of related to death, all of a sudden they see this card, they think something bad's going to happen.
I've been trying to figure this out for myself, and trying to go back in memory and figure out when was the point when I realized that Friday the 13th was evil. It may have been something that was passed down from my older brother to me in discussions, or may have been in school. I can't pinpoint anything, truly past anything before teenage years. And the joking around of it, or the playful pranks that you do are surrounding Friday the 13th, and anything before that, I really can't remember or pinpoint what made that date stand out in my mind as being a fearful or something that I should be fearful of. I never really believed it. I was a little leery of it, I know, growing up. But as I got older, I realized it's just another date, and people sort of put this power to it, really. But I can't figure it out. And again, I think it may have been something that's been embedded in cultures all around, well, not all around the world, because 13 is really Western, but basically in this country, that 13 is a number that you should fear, or is something that you should not incorporate in your daily life. I mean, look at it. Buildings, my work building does not have the floor 13 on it. Many hotels don't have 13th floor. You don't have a 13th row in an airplane. How is that so powerful to make us change for the masses, for as a society, that I could say abiding by the superstitions of the number 13? How could we do that?
I think media, I think print, I think books, stories has a lot to do with it. This is another case, to me, of, something negative happens to be on the 13th. And a story comes out of it, and someone tells that story to someone else, and then someone else tells that story to someone else, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, you know what? It happened on the 13th. This is when it happened. And then because you got to remember, this country that we're in, we were Puritans in the beginning. I mean, religion really kind of dictated the way people lived. So a lot of these things about 13th are coming from the Bible. You've got the stories about, Jesus and Judas and Adam and Eve. And I saw that somebody had posted in the chat room, how do they know what day Eve gave Adam the apple,
Right.
But these are all religious stories. So we're in a country that the history is revolving around religion. It's, we've got the Puritans and all of that. So I think if you have someone, again, maybe a form of control, wants people to toe the line and follow the good book, you have something that happens on the 13th, they're going to grab whatever is in that story that's going to strengthen their view. And I think maybe 13 was it.
I believe that. I think you're telling the complete truth about what I believe was the beginning stages of this all. But here we are in 2016, and we're still abiding by it. We're still building buildings without the floor 13. Even Japan, they shy away from putting the number 4 or 9 in their hotels. You look at the elevators. There's no 4 or 9 written down on there, or implanted in there. So it's not just here. It's that fear that's being incorporated into the building and the creation of things in our everyday lives. But we're talking 2016 right now. It's kind of strange to think that we're still abiding by some superstition things that happened hundreds of years ago, where this sort of was prevalent. Especially around, I guess, the spiritual era, and so I don't know. It's kind of odd that we're continuing it. Is it just laziness that we're just doing it just because we've done it, or do people still believe it?
Superstitions like they're so embedded in everything we do. Someone sneezes, you say, bless you. And that's really a superstition. I mean, kids' games,
That's more religious, though.
Well, but they come from something. They believe. No, actually, it is kind of religious because if you sneeze, I think it was that they believe that your spirit was leaving the body, so they said bless you. I'm trying to think. There's like so many little things that we do on a daily basis that really kind of have a basis in superstition. So I think once something gets so embedded in daily life that we just kind of like go along with it, even though there's no really logical or real reason to do it, I think we still do it.
Well, let's, if you don't mind, Lucy, let's bring a caller on the line who I know pretty much can sort of outweigh our brains by the masses. Noah, are you there?
I am here. Don't say I'll outweigh you guys. You guys have done your research. How you guys doing?
Hi, Noah.
Hi, Lucy. Hi, Anthony. Good to hear from you guys.
Good for you to call in. We need brains in this discussion. What can you add?
Lord have mercy. Well, it's I had so many thoughts. I will say this. Like you guys said, it's culturally determined because, as you guys have pointed out and researched, different numbers have different cultures have different bugaboos about numbers. And The interesting part when it comes to Judeo-Christian belief is that if you look at numerology, the number 12 is a significant number because 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles, and like you guys pointed out with Judas being the 13th, there was a betrayal there. So anything over 12 is seen as a lack of governance or is seen as bizarre. But then if you look back...
What I had learned about the number 12 was, and it also goes with spiritual mysticism as well, that it was sort of completeness. 12 was the completeness of something, and then anything after that sort of unraveled, disrupted that completeness feeling.
Exactly. And if we go back a little bit further, predating Christianity and even Judaism and looking into Kabbalah, ancient Jewish mysticism, we find that when we look at the book of Isaiah, Jesus, of course, as you guys mentioned, was thought to be crucified on a Friday.
Right.
The number 13, consistent with Kabbalah, it's very numerological, is if you look at it, that day is considered what they call a 4. And a 4 represents suffering. And so deeply embedded in pre-Judaism, Judaism and Christianity, 4 is seen as a suffering number because, of course, 3 plus 1 is 4. You put that on a Friday, that's when Jesus died. And so people, they tend to look at that as a bad thing. The other thing I wanted to point out is that Tibetan Buddhism came to mind. Any odd number in Tibetan Buddhism is thought as positive. And I think for us, we all have our own, we place value on things that mean nothing really. For example, we have our good luck shirt. We have our good luck days. Because as you guys pointed out, a certain day this happened, a good thing happened, or this is a bad day for me, or this is a bad season for me. I'll say it. I refuse to wear red underwear anymore. Anytime I've worn red underwear, I've been in a car wreck. I have failed a test. And so from my own personal experience, so I have some external locus of control in my life, I won't wear red underwear. And it's kind of the same thing. And I don't mean to devalue it.
But wait, no, I just want to...
I didn't feel weird.
I just want to expand on that a bit. And this is sort of what I had talked to Lucy about just a few minutes ago on the air. Has anything else negative happened to you in your life when you were wearing white underwear or blue underwear?
Probably.
That you can think of.
And it's weird. Not that I can think of, but for some reason I made this weird association. And so
Right.
I feel like I have a better control over my life. It's like, okay, we're going to go all neutral. We're going to have grays and blues and blacks and go with that. And I know people are, maybe laughing because, they go to Victoria's Secret and they're like, oh, no, only red and pink for me. But for me, I would probably run and scream like a girl. But we we develop these bugaboos. But the funny part is 13, like you guys indicate, has become a collective phenomenon. We all shy away from it. For some reason, we're taught that that's a scary thing, and so we cringe. I even cringe thinking today was Friday the 13th, and I'm not superstitious. Well, I kind of am, but when I saw it was coming, I thought, oh Lord, what's going to happen today? But nothing bad happened. But it's still there in our mind.
Yeah, and it's perpetuated within the media. I mean, the longevity and the life of this phenomenon has just, you can consider it as creating the now zombie effect for Friday the 13th. It may have sort of been lying down in its grave at some point, but I think when media started to hype up everything, 50, 60 years ago about Friday the 13th, I think now it's become the zombie roaming the land that has now permeated into every generation that is living on the planet right now.
Noah,
Absolutely.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, yeah.
You said that you're superstitious.
Uh-huh.
Why are you superstitious? I mean, the red underwear aside. I mean, why are you superstitious? Why do these things affect you?
I think it's learned behavior, and if people want to test this, they can do so. For example, and it works especially in guys. If you ask them, what are you afraid of? And if a guy says, I'm afraid of spiders, or I'm afraid of heights, and then you ask them, what was your mother afraid of? Fears are inherited through guys, I know, from their mother. And so my mom came from a very southern background. There's, for example, her grandmother, my great-grandmother, taught us if you drop a comb, you have to step on it before you pick it up. I don't know the meaning, but to this day, if I drop a comb, I will step on it and pick it up. So that is inherited typically through the mother. And it's weird that we learn fears. Another big one is storms. If you see a boy or a man that's terrified of lightning or something like that, you can pretty much bet within a 90% chance that his mother was terrified of storms. But again, I think it's about control. Control of not, like you said, Lucy, about controlling the masses by imposing another form of fear on people through religion. But I think it's also a form of control for us. If we know that certain things are bad, then if we counteract those, then we feel like we have more control over our lives. And maybe it's more of a mental process than metaphysical. I don't know, but that's a good question I think we can ask.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you because, how many times have people, when they're in a conversation, I hope there's no bad weather on the wedding day. Knock on wood, knock on wood. How many times have people have done that? I've done it myself. It's just automatic, and it's just, again, it's become embedded. It's inherited. I've seen it happen in my life growing up, and I do it myself now automatically, even though I'm really not superstitious at all. And so it just, begs the question, how does that get in there? How do we, start? I mean, yes, it could be control, and we learn that at some age, early age or not early age, but somehow we hold that closer to us, and sort of it becomes, subconscious, at a subconscious level that it comes out from, and it creates the actions and the way that we live our lives that we don't even know that we're doing it half the time.
Well, okay, Noah, you said your mom's from the South. So is mine. She's North Carolina. So to this day, I still won't open an umbrella inside the house, because that was one thing that she always said, no, you don't open an umbrella inside the house because it brings bad luck. There were a couple other things about calling storms and that. So I don't believe these things, but yet there's still things that I just happen to do because that's what my mother said. And then even growing up, I don't know, I mean, jumping rope, or either walking down the street, step on a crack, break your mama's back, silly
Lord.
little things like
That
that.
caused me so much anxiety as a kid. How many cracks are in the road? I walked to school every day from 1st to 5th grade, and I'll tell you, that was a long walk. I did not want to break my mama's back. But as you get older, I mean, sometimes we can break through those things. I mean, we're afraid of certain things, and then we realize, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So as I got older, I started hopscotching on the cracks, just daring the fates to break my mom's back, and it's like, well, nothing happened. To this day, my mom has these antique umbrellas in a holder in her house, and my nephews, they all know about the whole superstition about opening it in the house. I'll open it up and run around, and they'll be screaming like little girls, and I'm like, nothing's gonna happen. They're like, and they scream. It's funny, but I think we can shake some of those, but some we can't. Like Anthony said, knock on wood, I still do that. And like you said, Lucy, bless you. For me, that's kind of had a change in meaning. It's almost like a polite thing. If I sneeze and nobody says anything, I almost feel insulted. I don't know if I carry a chip on my shoulder, but it's like, hey, I sneezed. Does anyone care?
Right.
But then when somebody burps in public or burps or coughs, it's like, well, what do I say to that? It's like, well, good for you. So, there's a lot of... To hear a sociologist or psychologist talk about this would be amazing, because I'm sure they have a lot of insights too. But you guys, this is a great topic, and I'm glad you did it, and you're doing it in a fresh way. So I appreciate it.
Where do you think this all started from? Do you think it was religion, or do you think it's somewhere else?
Personally, I think because we are, as Lucy said, we're a puritanical society. I really think it started with religion. I think that might have been the impetus, but I could be wrong. But because of all the references that you guys mentioned and some other ones that I brought up, I think that as Americans, it probably was religion. But at the same time, with the increasing number of nuns, people that don't identify with any denomination or religion, it's amazing that we still cling to those old beliefs. There's still kind of that hangover, and I think there always will be.
I don't know, this is always fascinating to me. I've never, again, maybe, subconsciously, I am at some level superstitious, but I don't make, any effort into, I don't plan my day according to what's going on and what superstition I have to avoid. Today was Friday 13th. I woke up just like any other day and did my work any other day. It just, it doesn't have an effect on me. There are things that I look at when doing research on other topics and things, if superstition has an involvement in, and can there be some sort of explanation to it. But I've always wondered, as I've mentioned for almost a year now, I've been questioning religion for a while. And, it begs to, the question has always popped in my head, and it just begs to ask if the people in the groups and all of those men that had written the Bible, obviously, in my opinion, I believe that the Bible was written in order for control. As we're talking about control, it was created for control and control of society. And the stories that were embedded into this book were geared towards that manner. And so my belief is that, hell was created so that there's this fear in people not to kill, not to do, X, Y, and Z. And so could the number 13, because there's many references and many areas in the Bible itself where 13 is prominent. That number is very prominent in either it's the number of people, either it is whatever it may be, the number 13 seems to be very prevalent in the Bible. And would you think, or could somebody conclude that it may have been implanted purposely, so that the fear may have been lingering in societies prior to the existence of the Bible being written, that they said, you know what, well, let's just add this fear into that upon the other fears that we're going to add into the stories.
That's a good question, and your comments make sense, too, because if you, in reading the Bible, a big part, especially in the Old Testament, was to propagate and be fruitful and multiply. And if you have 13, you've got the odd person out, and you want to make babies. You want to spread the lineage, and even and this isn't stereotyping, but in my experience, even to this day, Jewish people they like to pair with other Jewish people, and they're always about having the babies, and that spills over into Christianity too, because we're very Judeo-centric. So I think the fear was almost, now that I think about it, Anthony, is that the fear being you can't be the odd person out. You have to find a mate no matter what, so that you can have a family, you can have kids, and you can continue the population. That maybe that was another way of control, another method of making people afraid, so that they would find somebody no matter what. I didn't mean to make this about dating. I like walks on the beach. I'm an Aquarius.
We'll put your post up on our Facebook
page. That's another consideration.
It just, I don't know, it just begged the question to me to either just ask it and see if there's a possibility of an answer to it. If there's no answer, then fine, there's no answer to it. But I've just always thought about that, I'm sure there are purposely, the men that put this book together, that there were stories and examples of history that were put into this book purposely to make a point, or to, again, like I said before, create the control that they were trying to do at that point, at a point in time. And so, even though that, it was at the time that they wrote this, could 13 have been something that, maybe they just added in as creating more of that scare factor, that fear factor, that, that creepiness, and so, there's 13 of this, 13 of that. Maybe there is some sense to this because of my belief in the number 13 being unlucky. It's just something that I thought about. And
well, that's a great point. Yes, go ahead.
I want to ask you a question, okay? Going back to religion a little bit, and I've always
now wait a minute before you ask. Just Noah, remember what I had said before. Lucy's name has 13 letters in it.
I know, right?
So
okay, Lucifer. What's your question? I'm sorry. I'm kidding.
Now that I have your attention. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I've always been fascinated, okay, by the story of the apparition at Fatima. Okay, the number 13 is associated with the Virgin Mary in Catholic religion. There's a lot of things that 13 tends to be related to her. Her apparitions in this incident all happened on the 13th of each month that she came by. So I have a little trouble with 13 being negative, because if you are, if you truly believe in this, you believe in the Blessed Mother, wouldn't the 13th, that she showed up on the 13th, wouldn't that make that a glorious day as opposed to something negative?
But didn't she come warning?
She
exactly,
did.
Anthony.
Right?
And I say this as somebody, literally right now, I have a 3-foot statue, not of Fatima, but of Our Lady of Guadalupe, in my living room with candles lit. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you guys, Fatima is probably the one apparition I have the most trouble with, because it seemed politically driven. It was about communism, to the point where the Virgin Mary talked. If you look, there are unforgivable or detestable sins, and I don't remember the number. I don't want to say 13, that she listed off to the 3 children, and it was they kept everything so secretive. Even like the 3rd secret of Fatima, you'll watch documentaries or read different things about what it could have been. But she was probably that version of or that manifestation of the Virgin Mary was probably the most dire about the end of the world.
Right.
It was very staunchly against communism, which played right into, if you look at other cultural considerations at the time, communism was the big devil. I mean, Walt Disney even came in, and you can look up on YouTube, there's propaganda videos about communism and what that would do to our entire world. So, but at the same time, if you look at the current days and you think of, our larger countries that are communist, they're kind of scary. So there could be truth in it. So I'm really torn with that. That's a great question, Lucy. You would think that would be glorious that she came on that 13th day, but at the same time, I don't know. I really don't, and that's a great question.
It's just something that's always been in the back of my mind. I never equated it with the 13 being negative. I mean, to me, if you were a true believer that this happened on the 13th, that would make the 13th a good day.
And in fact, maybe that was, for believers, maybe that was a way that the Virgin Mary tried to counteract that fear and what men had contrived over the millennia within the Bible, within religion. Maybe that was a legitimate attempt to kind of break that spell, as it were, so that people didn't see the 13th as bad.
Mm-hmm.
So that I make a very good point by bringing up Fatima. That's a good one.
Does anybody know what the age of the girls were? Here we go. 11, 16. I'm trying to think if any of them were 13. Just trying to find a link. No.
Yeah. But one other thing, kind of off topic, but something else that your listeners may want to look at too is that in German culture, which is spilled over into our culture, especially with Halloween. If you want to look at the history of Halloween, Germans had a big role in the way that we celebrate it and the way we decorate. A lot of it. It's pretty cool, and they were very lavish with it. But they composed a lot of the fairy tales that we know, Grimm's fairy tales, like Hansel and Gretel, and those were very didactic. They were cautionary tales used to control kids and make them behave a certain way. And I wonder if people were to look at some of the more common ones, if 13 is part of that. For example, Hansel and Gretel, the full version, if you read it, I mean, angels show up. It's a whole different story than what we're told, and it's basically a cautionary tale about being a glutton. You'll end up with a witch, and she'll try to kill you. Even with Little Red Riding Hood, it's about disobeying and going off the trail. The wolf's going to eat your grandma, but then a man comes in and he actually cuts the wolf open and lets grandma out. They're pretty gruesome, and the name Grimm was coincidental for some reason. But again, that kind of goes back to what you guys are saying about control and moving the masses, but it starts with children. You can even look at Christmas with the Krampus in German culture, because, and I think you guys have covered that before, but you didn't just have Santa, you had Krampus, and if you were a bad kid, Krampus would come and give you nightmares and whip you with a switch, and you wouldn't get any good toys or anything. So I think looking for the number 13 and control are probably, that would be a good question and a good kind of thesis for people that seriously want to understand this connection and why we cling to that stuff.
That's a good point to make, and it's actually sort of, bottom line thought about this is that it could be all about control and the idea. And you mentioned Germany, but there's a date, I don't remember the date, during the year, I think it's December 4th or December 8th or something like that, when St. Nick and Krampus actually walk the streets in certain towns in Germany, and they approach children. It's this whole celebration that they have, and the families bring out their children, and it's sort of like a judgment day. And Saint Nick and Krampus, decipher, and they ask the parents if the kids have been good or naughty, and depending on the answers, either Saint Nick or Krampus would then respond to them directly. And so, there you go, is sort of that control and that putting that fear in children, starting them young, and learning about control is something that has been created at an early age.
My Lord, I would have had a panic attack. I went to Sears or wherever. I got my picture with Santa. If they brought up a devil figure and said, "Okay, let's talk it out, Noah," I would have hated Christmas. It would have killed me. Terrifying. If people are talking about that, they'll see the pictures of how scary they are. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they are. It is. But I just have one last question for Noah. What underwear are you wearing today?
I am well, thank you for asking. I am wearing a black pair of Calvin Klein loose fit cotton. And so I hope everyone can picture that. You can find me on Facebook, Noah Tysick, Tysick. I appreciate all followers, admirers.
And you like long walks on the beach, right?
Long walks on the beach. I'm an Aquarius, and I prefer Coke over Pepsi. So, anyone's looking.
Lucy, I have a battle with you.
Devil.
But no, thank you guys again. Great show, and thank you for letting me talk a little bit. I don't want to take over and take all your time, but I'll be listening and watching on YouTube. It's great what you guys are doing on YouTube. If people have not checked that out, you can actually see Lucy and Anthony on camera while they're talking, which I think is so awesome. So check that out.
And you'll realize why we do radio and not television. That's why.
Absolutely not. They're everything you dreamed of and more.
Well, thank you, Noah, so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you and get your insight. We love talking to you, and don't be a stranger, huh?
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you, Noah.
Have a great one.
Bye. No, but he made a point. I mean, think about it. What better way to get your beliefs, to have your children grow up a certain way? You start when they're young. So this is where, like, the fairy tales came in. You take your little beliefs and rules and you put them into a story. And then you tell that story to that child every night at bed. Now, with Friday the 13th, okay, so there's superstitions. Maybe we don't all believe in them. But what better way to perpetuate it by starting a whole series of movies called Friday the 13th? I mean, we're perpetuating this. We're doing it ourselves.
That's what Hollywood's for. That's what the media is for. And it's funny because what's the age when children turn from being sort of an adolescent to, sort of a pain in the ass? What's the age?
I don't know.
13. It's when you become a teenager, basically. That's when, you think you have the control. You think that you own the world. So, again, it's funny that this number 13 has, it's just a weird word to say, but it's impregnated itself into, everything that we think about and do. And to me, that's interesting. That's intriguing to me to figure out how that happened. How can that happen? And as we talk in this day of 2016, how can we still keep that perpetuating as we're talking about?
Do you know how old I was when I went to high school?
13?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a brainiac?
I skipped a grade.
Legally or not legally?
Legally. They pushed me a grade ahead because I was getting bored.
Oh, really?
So I was getting bored and I was misbehaving, and they found that I was not being challenged enough. So they pushed me up a grade, and I ended up at 13 in high school.
See, that's the young Lucifer.
Bad mistake.
The young Lucifer in the school system. You see what happens? Is there anything else that you wanted to add to Friday or the 13th before we get on to this mysterious murder mystery that is eerily similar to Friday the 13th movie series as Jason Voorhees? Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
I just wanted to mention some of the things that have happened on the Friday the 13th, okay? First one being Apollo 13. It is the only moon mission that was unsuccessful, okay? An oxygen tank exploded, and the survival of the astronauts on board was pretty touch and go for several days. Tupac, he was killed on the 13th. Let's see who else.
So was many other artists and singers on other dates.
Friday, October 13th, 1972, was a bad day in the history of aviation. That is the day that the Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 crashed in the Andes, killing 29 people. On that exact same day, 174 people were killed when a Soviet plane crashed. People that were born on Friday the 13th. Let's see. Alfred Hitchcock was born on Friday the 13th. Let me see. There was one more that I want. Oh, Friday, October 13th, 1989, and I was actually there when this happened. It was the crash of the stock exchange. It was a serious crash. It was, at the time, it was the second most damaging in market history. It was unbelievable. The market dropped so fast. I had never seen grown men cry until that day. It was to be in the middle of the trading pits and to see how badly the market dropped. It was just, and that's what everybody, oh God, why, I totally forgot about that. That's all that they were talking about. All these traders, all these market makers, all they were talking about was, it's Friday the 13th. That's why this happened. That's why this happened. Never mind all the other factors that could have gone into it. And
exactly.
Believe me, traders are probably the most superstitious people you will ever meet. But that day, when the market crashed, everybody blamed it on Friday the 13th.
I mean, in New York, people were throwing themselves off of roofs of buildings when that happened. So, there were many deaths during that time. But again, here we go, trying to again impose the blame of what went wrong on a date, not thinking about some of these corrupt men who did wrong, and that's where the blame should be lent. It should not be put on the date itself. I think that's what's happened throughout history. It's just displacement of or the reason of why things are happening is because of the date, not what the actual reason of things going wrong or why people are dying. It's the date and only the date. And I think that's put together in volumes is what people are now attesting to and believing in. I'm just curious. Whoever this is going to be put on YouTube. So if you're going to be watching this on YouTube, I'm curious if anybody wants to comment below. Do you believe in the superstition of Friday the 13th? And does it have any effect on the way that you live your life? Do you change the way that you do the things that you do because of either 13 or Friday the 13th? I would be interested to find out, who does and why.
Well, it's probably a good day to fly because a lot of people don't fly on Friday the 13th. So there's a lot of seats that are open, and you'll probably get a good price.
True. So, as we are still, we're on the East Coast, and you're on the Central. We're still on Friday the 13th. When we were doing the research for tonight's show, I tried to find some things that were unique and different that we can bring forward. And I, obviously thinking about the most famous thing in our history right now, going back within the last 40 years, Friday the 13th, the movie series. Is there any relation? And the first search that I tried to do was basically, is there a true life associated with Friday the 13th, the movie? And I found that to not be true. There was no true story that was based upon this series, or there's a lot of movies out there right now that claim to be based on a true story or based on true aspects of some story. And so I was just curious to see if that was. I had never heard of it before, but I just thought maybe I can see if I can find it. And, of course, I didn't. There wasn't anything. But there was, and there is still a story that is very eerily similar. I mean, very eerily similar to the Jason Voorhees character and this murder rampage that happened in Finland in 1960, which was, to me, a pretty gruesome type of murder and is still unsolved to this day. 50-some-odd years later, it is still unsolved. But I have an idea, and I'll talk about that after we discuss this murder mystery of who possibly may have done it. And I think Lucy has an idea as well as to who may have done it. But Lucy, what is your knowledge of this story that I talk about in Finland? Talk about, what, and again, this revolves around a lake in Finland with young teenage kids and a gruesome knife-wielding murderer killing children. So talk about it for a little bit.
Okay, well, this took place in Finland, and it was Lake Bodom. And Lake Bodom is a lake. It's near the city of Espoo, which is about 14 miles west of the country's capital, Helsinki. On June 5th, 1960, in the very early hours, 4 teenagers went camping on the shores of Lake Bodom. Sometime between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., an unknown person or persons murdered 3 of them with a knife and a blunt instrument, and they only wounded the 4th. The sole survivor led a normal life until 2004, but then he became a suspect, and he was subsequently charged. In October 2005, a district court found him not guilty of all charges against him. So, as of this point, there still isn't, it hasn't been solved. No one knows what happened.
So, I'm going to go through the names of the victims, and we'll go into a little bit more detail. Lucy and I will go into a little bit more detail about these murders. Some of the suspects that they think were possible suspects, but basically even during the time, I think it was even 9 years after this happened, 2 of the suspects had actually killed themselves. Is that right, Lucy? Did you get that information? 2 of them? So, okay, Lucy, you and I are going to take turns on this and try and name the victims. We mean no disrespect, but these are Finnish names, Finnish from Finland, and so I'm going to try and pronounce their names. I'll take the first one. Okay, the first victim is Meli Bjorklund, and she was 15 years old. She was stabbed and she was bludgeoned to death.
The second one is Anja Tulikki-Maki. She was 15. She was stabbed and bludgeoned to death.
The third victim is Seppo Antero Boisman, and he was 18 years old, and he was stabbed and bludgeoned.
And the last victim is the one who survived, and he is Nils Wilhelm Gustafsson, and he was 18. He survived, and he only had a concussion. He had fractures to the jaw and to his facial bones, and he had some bruises on his face.
Now, there's some weird elements to this case in particular. So, as Lucy had mentioned, these murders happened at Bodom Lake in Finland, early morning hours. They concluded that after interviewing Niels Gustafsson, who told them basically what had happened during the night and when the incident occurred. And they are planting the time around between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. that this happened. Obviously, the one lone survivor could not remember the time or did not realize what the time was, and sort of backtracked and figured it that. But the murder happened in this fashion. The 4 teenagers, the 2 boys and 2 girls, who were basically boyfriends and girlfriends, they rode out on their motorcycle. Obviously, this is the summertime, and they rode out on their motorcycle to go to this infamous spot where many teenagers would go to hang out. They would go there for just an evening of possibly drinking, eating, and little canoodling in the tent. And so this is what they set out to do, and this is what has been stated that they set out to do. So they pitched the tent near Bodom Lake, and at the course of the evening, had fun, drank, ate, and Niels Gustafsson had said that they actually went to bed early that night. They went into the tent around 9 p.m., which is kind of odd because the sun had probably just gone down at that point. But it's not unlike anyone who would go out to this lake to go to bed early just because of the notion that they wanted to get up early and leave the site and go back home. And so, as I mentioned before, they probably went to bed a little bit earlier to do a little canoodling in the tent, as teenagers do. So, the night progressed, and at some point between the early morning hours of around 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., a murderer, single or plural, they're not sure, approached the tent and attacked these 4 campers, these 4 teenage campers, with a knife and a metal or bludgeon object, heavy object. And this murderer proceeded to slash and wield his knife through the tent and almost stabbing blindly into it. And when I was reading this story, what did this story make you think of, Lucy?
Dyatlov.
Right. The Dyatlov Pass incident that had happened, and we talked about that incident where there was a mysterious death in some secluded Russian mountain range that eerily similar to that as well. There was slices in the tent, but those bodies were found frozen, obviously, in snow and in 18 below degree weather, frozen in the environment there because they were trying to run away from whatever was scaring them at the moment. But for this particular case, the murderer actually cornered or trapped these victims in their own tent and just started to wield his knife and this bludgeon object onto them. And I'm not talking about just 1 or 2 stab wounds. I think one of the victims, I'm not sure if it's Anja or Meili, had, I think it's close to, 15 or 18 stab wounds, in addition to a blunt object knocking her out. And they say that the actual blunt object that hit her in the head is what actually killed her. So every knife stab after that was pretty much not necessary. So you can get the idea in the picture of the frustration, the anger that this murderer has for these 4 kids. And luckily, as Lucy had mentioned, Niels Wilhelm Gustafsson was the only lone survivor of this. And they sort of try and downplay his injuries a little bit, talking about him being hit in the back of the head and in the front of the head. But he had a pretty gruesome fractured jaw. It wasn't a tap on the head. His eye was actually blown up because of the beatings to his head. But I'll leave the rest of that story till a little bit later. Was there anything that Lucy, you found interesting in this murder case and the way that this all came about?
The fact that that Nils. Well, see, let's go into the suspects because I have a few definite ideas with the things that I found.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
They did, so as we said before, there were 4 suspects, okay? And the first one his name was Paulie Luoma, and he was a runaway from a local work department. The police caught him soon after the murders. They questioned him. They did find out that he had a valid alibi, and he was reportedly at a different location at the time of the murders. The second suspect was named Pentti Sonanen, and he was a maintenance man. Now, he had been convicted of several property and violent crimes in the late 1960s. At the age of 24, while he was in jail, he confessed that he committed the Lake Bodom murders. But the police, they interrogated him, and his confession, for some reason, they didn't give his confession much weight. He was reportedly a psychopath who could be incredibly cryptic, especially while under the influence of alcohol and drugs. His criminal record included thefts, assaults, robberies. He, in 1969, he did hang himself at a prisoner transport station. The third suspect
This one's interesting.
Is Valdemar Gillstrom. Now, he's one of the prime suspects of the murders. He was a kiosk keeper from Oita. He was known to have hated campers, and he was known to behave aggressively.
And he was actually one of the, when they talk about the kiosk manager, he was actually at this lake, it's sort of like a campsite. It became not a touristy thing, but sort of a local thing. And so this man had set up shop near the lake to, possibly sell soda or chips or something to make money off of, this newfound area where many kids would go, many adults would go. It's a huge lake. It's a big lake. It's not, I'm not talking about a 1 mile, square radius lake. This is a really big lake. And so this gentleman decided to, create a business out of it. But it's funny because if he wanted to create a business out of it and hate campers at the same time, that's kind of strange.
So he had a reputation where he would literally say he hated the campers. Excuse me. He was aggressive in nature. I mean, even his wife seemed to be very afraid of him. Now, when the police were looking at him, they did. He had a well. He dug a well on his land, and he filled it up, which the police found kind of suspect. They studied the well. They tried to see if there was any kind of weapons that were there. Now, keep in mind, in this case, the murder weapons were never found whatsoever. So the police thought that possibly Gillstrom could have put them at the bottom of the well. They never found them. And according to the police, Gillstrom's wife gave them an alibi, said she was awake the whole night that this happened, and he had never left the house. But later on, before she died, she did say that her husband threatened to kill her if she told the truth. But this is after the fact.
You also have to add in, though, what makes this even more eerily similar to the Friday the 13th movie is, where did Valdemar die? Where did he kill himself?
Oh, hold on. You have to give that one because I don't have that in.
He killed himself at the lake. He drowned himself at Bodom Lake, which, again, is eerily similar to how Jason Voorhees died in Friday the 13th. As a kid, he was, killed in the lake and then came to life. So, again, you've got something really strange and really odd correlation to this. And I bet if you were to talk to the directors or the producers of Friday the 13th, could there have been some sort of, hey, I read this story and it probably could make a good movie, and they just never linked the two together.
But they keep claiming that it's not based on this.
I know, and they keep saying it, and they confess that it is not. But anyway, I don't want to get off the topic of that because Valdemar is a very interesting suspect.
And then we have the last suspect, and I really don't want to say his name. His name is
Can I say his name?
Yeah, you can say it.
Hans Assmann. It's probably pronounced Osman. This is Finnish, so it's probably Hans Osman, but I like to say Assmann.
Well, most of the suspicion was focused on Hans. Okay, he was an alleged KGB spy. On June 6th, 1960, he went into the Helsinki Surgical Hospital, and his behavior at that time was really weird. He appeared disheveled, his fingernails were black, his clothes were covered in red stains. Now, they said that he may have lied to the hospital staff because of the appearance, and he also pretended to be unconscious, he was aggressive, and he was nervous. His clothing matched the description of the Lake Bodom murderer. He cut off his long blonde hair after details regarding the appearance of the murderer was revealed on the news. He lived within 5 kilometers of Bodom, which is something like about maybe 6 miles or so. His behavior suggested guilt at the time. The way he was acting, they figured that he was guilty. Let's see. In fact, some of the doctors who took care of him when he went into the hospital, they were certain that the stains were composed of blood. Now, see, here's one thing that I found kind of weird. He's in a hospital. He's got these red stains on his clothes. I would assume that in the hospital, they would be able to tell if your clothes are stained with blood. Now, I don't know. This is back in the 60s. That's just one thing that I found kind of odd about this.
But there's that link that he has with the KGB that makes this all the more different. Not so much suspicious, but different. And I think maybe because of the fact that he was involved in the KGB, there's even the story that the local police in the area of Bodom Lake, that they approached the KGB, and the KGB said to them, you have no ground to stand on to question Hans Assmann, so walk away. That was basically what they told the police. Well,
Hans was suspected in 5 other murders. I mean, this wasn't a lone incident for him. There were a couple other unsolved Finnish homicides where there was a murder of a young girl. There was a double murder that he was suspected in. Let's see. He was German-born, but became a Finnish citizen later. He stole the identity of a soldier during the war. He had been a member of the Waffen SS when he was 18 and actually worked as a guard at Auschwitz. He stole. That's why he stole the identity of the other soldier after the war, because he was afraid that his association with the Nazis was going to get him killed.
But you have to, all of these other murders that he may or may not have committed were not going to go anywhere. There was, because he was within the KGB and because he was, nobody wanted, especially in the 60s, nobody wanted to stir anything with the Soviets. Nobody wanted to stir up or cause any controversy or create any chaos with the Soviets. And so, yes, they may have questioned or wanted to question him about the Bodom murders as well as these other murders, but he's almost like an ambassador. he can get away with pretty much almost anything, and nobody can do anything because he's got the KGB credential.
Mhm. Yeah. So pretty much, it seems like the Finns, they didn't want to make the Soviets angry, so therefore they didn't follow up on this. Now, those were the 4 suspects, but the police never could tie any one of these people specifically to this murder. It went unsolved until late March 2004, which is 44 years after the event. They arrested Nils Gustafsson. He was arrested on suspicion of having murdered his 3 friends. In 2005, the Finnish National Bureau of Investigation declared the case was solved based on some new analysis on the bloodstains. According to the official statement, Gustafsson erupted in jealous anger over his feelings for Björklund, his new girlfriend. She was stabbed multiple times after the fatal blow, while the other 2 teenagers were less savagely killed. His own injuries, while notable, were less severe.
Right, and that's why I mentioned that his girlfriend was the one that was actually brutally stabbed many, many times and hit in the head, as opposed to the other 2.
Yeah, he went to trial on August 4th, 2005. Prosecution called for life imprisonment for Gustafsson. They argued that the re-examination of the old evidence using modern techniques such as DNA profiling raises the suspicion towards him. The defense argued that the murders were the work of one or more outsiders and that Gustafsson would have been incapable of killing 3 people given the extent of his injuries. So on October 7th, 2005, Gustafsson was then acquitted of all charges.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, once he was acquitted, he got paid by the state of Finland. They paid him $51,296 for the mental suffering caused by the time he had been held.
There's one element within the murder that we didn't mention yet. I sort of alluded to mentioning it earlier, and that was the fact that Nils Gustafsson's shoes were missing from his feet, and they were found, I'm not sure how far away, but let's just say maybe
700 meters.
There you go, 700 meters away from the campsite. And there was blood on the shoes. So the theory, and I don't know if this is Nils Gustafsson's theory or not, that the murderer actually wore his shoes because in order for him to have received the blood on the shoes, he had to have been either within the proximity of the victims or be the murderer himself. Now, when the murderer approached the tent, as far as I can remember from this story, Nils was one of, I believe he was the first one to get hit and get attacked. And therefore, he actually, because the tent ripped, he pretty much almost fell out of the tent himself. So while the murders were happening with the other 3 victims, he was sort of away from the bodies. And so therefore, the shoes could not have received the blood splatters. I mean, this is what they're saying. I don't know. Nobody was really there to say about it other than Nils. But how did his shoes move from the vicinity? There's also 2 boys. Did you hear about the 2 boys that came upon the campsite? And
there were 2 witnesses.
There were 2 witnesses that came forward that say that and claim that they were there at the time between 4 and 6 a.m. when this murder occurred, and they saw the what they think was the murderer actually leaving the campsite. They then approached the tent and noticed that the 3 victims were there, but Nils was not. And so it leads me to question, and it leads me to conclude that, in my opinion, Niels Gustafsson is the murderer.
Mm-hmm.
He could have inflicted the injuries that he had to himself. He could have thrown himself down onto heavy boulder rocks to give him the broken jawbone and the hits to the back of the head. It's very strange and eerie that his girlfriend at the time was the one that received the most stab wounds as opposed to the other two victims. And the idea that there could have been some sort of jealousy tirade, or it's just maybe some manic, depressive, crazy kid who is just hyped up on alcohol and, could have started an argument of some sort, or something may have been stirred during the course of the evening, led to this incident. It's just there's really some strange elements and parts to this story that lead me to, and convince me that it is Niels. Because also, too, why would the police, after 44 years, then bring up Niels and say that he did it without having some sort of substantial evidence or some substantial facts to base it upon? Now, it's one thing where the court of law says you don't have enough evidence to back up or substantiate your claims, and so therefore this person is considered innocent or not guilty in the eyes of the law. That doesn't mean that they're innocent or not guilty. There are many people who have been, taken off of cases and have been awarded this prize when even though they may have actually committed the murder. What do you think, Lucy?
I think he did it because there's there's one thing in particular that he had claimed that just doesn't make sense to me. He said that he was in a state of shock after everything happened, and he claimed that he saw a vision of black and bright red eyes coming for them.
Go ahead.
He was also hypnotized. They did a hypnosis session with him, and they were asking him the questions about what was going on. And he talks about how, they, between 8 and 10, they were sitting and talking, that only the guys were drinking, the girls weren't. Let's see. The girls had gone to sleep. He doesn't remember if he went to sleep. He said he woke up before sunrise. He went to the beach with his friend to go fishing, but the girls were still in the tent. Let's see, what else?
There was
and
one
then
thing.
He says that he woke up in the Red Cross, and that's the last thing he remembered.
I wanted to bring up one thing within that hypnosis that he went under, and this was just a short while after the murders. He was, still a teenager, 18 years old, basically at this point when he went under hypnosis, and there's one portion of this in the questioning, in the line of questioning that they were asking him, and obviously they were asking, what did the perpetrator look like? And he answered blonde hair and so on and so forth. But just, anybody, if you're in Finland, everybody and anybody has blonde hair.
Has long blonde hair.
Exactly, in Finland. So, he then started to describe, they asked him what did his nose look like, straight. What did his mouth look like? Normal. There wasn't anything, particular other than he mentioned about pimples on the perpetrator's forehead and cheeks. But what was strange was that he also mentioned to the doctor who was doing the hypnosis was that he was able to determine that the murderer, the perpetrator, was drunk. Now, to me, if you're locked in a tent somewhere, you're covered by this material, and some strange man is outside of your tent stabbing through and bludgeoning through your tent, and you are desperately trying to obviously get away, if not trying to help your fellow friends in the tent get away from whatever is going on, you do not have the time to sit there and analyze the body reactions, the facial reactions of this murderer to determine whether or not he's drunk or not. I can't. You can't determine that without understanding or observing the body behavior and the facial expressions of a person. And so if you had the time to determine he was drunk, then you should have been able to determine everything about this murderer down to, how many pimples he had on his forehead and cheek, and whether or not he was shaved or not, or if he had hair in his ears. You should know all those things if you had that time to analyze if he was drunk or not.
Well, see, the thing is, okay, going back, the case was reopened because supposedly the police had said that the technology had advanced enough where that they could check the DNA. That's the main reason why they reopened the investigation. The second thing that really struck me about this is the fact that the shoes. I'm sorry, this is a person that is, it just seems highly unlikely that he would just take the shoes to wear and wear his shoes away from the scene and then all of a sudden take them off. I mean, if this was something, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. Why would he take Nils' shoes? Why not the other dead boy? And then the fact, when the two boys, they were about 12 or 13, and when they described what they saw, they said they saw the tent collapsed on the ground. They didn't see Nils or a half-naked girl lying on the tent. So, which means, something happened there. I mean, where, out of all this there, how is it that those shoes, Nils' shoes, ended up so far away? Because, like you said, they determined that the killer wore those shoes.
They had alluded to that effect because of the blood stains on the shoes itself, and that they were found, a good distance away.
That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, unless Nils is trying to set this up, say, whoever did this ran away, he took my shoes, look, he left them way over there. It falls in line with maybe trying to set this up for somebody else to take the blame. I do believe that Nils probably got rejected. I'm sure because he, like you said, he said that the two of them were drinking. The girls weren't drinking. They're 15 years old. These guys are 18. He knew what he wanted. He wanted to get some. This girl probably rejected his advances. And because of the severity of her injuries, he was pissed. He was probably drunk himself, and he probably took it out on her. He probably got into a rage and went after everybody. But the fact that her injuries were worse than anybody else, that's a personal attack. Why would she? I mean, it's just, she was his girlfriend. She's the one that ended up being hurt more than anybody else. And again, like you said, he, his own injuries, yes, they were severe. Well, of course, you just murdered 3 people. So, you're going to bang your head against a rock. You're going to try to make it look like you had gotten very badly hurt. I believe he hit himself or, hit himself with a rock or something. It just doesn't make sense. And my gut feeling goes towards, while the other suspects have, there's weird things about it, especially the kiosk keeper. I found that kind of weird. It's like, okay, here you are. You're this is your job. You're supposed to bring people into the park. You set them up, and you're sitting there and you're publicly saying how much you hate campers. That was kind of weird. But the personal side of this was a personal attack on that girl. I believe Nils got rejected and just freaked out about it.
Yeah, there was some also discrepancies in during the course of the hypnosis, too, when they were questioning him about when he opened up his eyes and when he could see. At one point during the hypnosis, he mentioned that he could not tell what was happening to his friends in the tent, but he was hearing the screams of the girls. And when they questioned him, well, why didn't you see what was happening? And he said he had closed his eyes because blood was in his eyes. Now, he then sort of retracted it a bit during this hypnosis and said yes. And what he did say was he only opened his eyes when he came to in the Red Cross. But then he retracted that and said he faintly remembers opening his eyes during the course of it to be able to give this description of what he claims to be the murderer of this case. So there's many things that happened in this case at the time that the Finnish police, really should have investigated a little bit more into. Like, they should have actually went to Valdemar's well and actually dug that up to see whether or not there was any weapons or what, because what I had heard that he had it filled and sealed 2 days after the murders. And, you may say, okay, that's kind of odd, but, in order for a well to be sealed up, that's not something that you can just do on the spur of the moment. You need materials, you need the rocks. So could he have maybe had this planned and had an appointment for this to be done on his property before this happened, and it just coincidentally happened 2 days after the murder? But why can't you? If he's a suspect and there is a good enough reason, and especially if he's screaming and admitting to the murderers while being drunk one night, as the case has said, that he actually admitted to murdering them, why could you not go to the home of Valdemar and dig up this well and find out what is buried under there? What happened?
And the other thing that just is kind of weird, if he considered this girl his girlfriend, and I don't know, maybe I've watched too many movies, but if you hear her screaming and he's awake, he's aware, don't you think that he would have at least attempted to try to help her to go back to the tent and do something? But according to this, he just laid there.
He had said basically that he was knocked unconscious, and so.
But yet he remembered all these details.
Yeah, I mean, he could have just, for the sake of argument, he could have, been able to see the murderer and the attack before he was bludgeoned over the head, or in the back of the head, or in front of his face, to knock him out unconscious and then lay there for dead. But the case also had mentioned that the wallets and purses and money from the victims were also taken and were never recovered or found. So that to me seems like it's a cover-up, because if it's a murder, if it's a robbery, you wouldn't need to bludgeon and stab kids, 18 and 15-year-olds. How much money are you going to get from an 18 and a 15-year-old that you need to seriously stab them like a maniac in order to get? I can understand, doing that to Donald Trump or doing that to someone who's got a lot of money. You want to make sure they're dead so you can take their wallet and their money and credit cards or whatever. But to an 18 and 15-year-old, I don't see how that's plausible. And somebody had mentioned in chat that, I think it was Sharon, had mentioned that when typically there's a stabbing victim, it's more so personal. It's someone who's close to the victim, because it is it's considered, I guess, a personal attack. And I kind of agree with that, guns, on the other hand, are colder, more impersonal. You're at a distance. Knives, you have to be obviously close to. Obviously there are, knife bandits out there, knife robberies, and so on and so forth. But for something like this, where it's multiple times of stabbing, there's anger behind that hand. there is drunkenness, there's something that's going on in that body that is wielding that knife that is attached to these victims that makes it a little bit more different than just a stranger coming up upon this campsite.
Yeah, I mean, you've got two 15-year-old girls, two 18-year-old guys. Like I says, I honestly believe that this was just something that went wrong. The evening went wrong. They had liquor. He even admitted that they had gotten somebody else to buy the liquor for them. I believe that.
Do you think it may have been premeditated?
No.
Do you think he didn't plan this?
No, I don't think that he went out there with the intention of killing her. He went out there with the intention of having sex with her. And I believe that the girl said no. She may have, 15-year-old girl, I can only a million years ago think about it. Sure, you see an older guy, he's intriguing, you're flattered by the attention, you start to make out, and then all of a sudden you realize this is something I can't do. This is something I don't want to do. I'm assuming that kicked in for her. She said no. She rejected him, and he lost it. He lost it because I truly believe that his intention, the intention of the guys taking those girls out there, they're older than these girls. It wasn't like they were other 18-year-old girls. They were 15. A 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, sure, there are some mature girls, but in this, I'm really thinking that these girls, I think maybe they got in over their head. And I think that once she realized, oh, my God, this is what he wants to do, I think she said no. And I believe that he got angry, and I think that anger just went over the edge.
I think, and we have a caller on the line, I'm going to pick them up from Kansas, but I think the whole idea of going to Bodom Lake was notorious and synonymous with the idea that you're going there for a reason. You're going there to have fun. You're going there to have sex. That's what the kids did. And so I think his girlfriend knew exactly what was going to be going on before, they even got on the motorcycle and went off there. So I'm not sure if, it was just she didn't know what she was getting into and something happened, or maybe she could have and changed her mind. I'm not saying that at all. But I think her being oblivious to the idea that, they were going there to have fun, quote unquote fun, was one of the reasons, and for her to not realize that, I don't think it's kind of true. I think there may have been some sort of scuffle. Maybe she did change her mind, or maybe there was some argument where all four of them got into it, and just a wielding rage went off on all of them. And so that may have been what transpired there.
Well, let's just, for the sake of argument, I'm sure that everybody knew that this was a make-out point. Everyone knew that would happen. But let's say he just happened to get hold of the one girl that really didn't realize what was going on, that she was that innocent, naive. Think about it. You're an 18-year-old guy. You're trolling 15-year-olds. Of course, you're going to look for somebody that's easy, somebody that doesn't know what's going on. A naive girl. I think that's what happened.
True. I can take that. All right, let's pick up this caller. Hello, you are on the line with Anthony and Lucy. Who's calling?
Hey, this is Jeremy, guys. What's going on?
Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
Hi.
Hey, what's going on? Hey, I'm actually not calling you from Kansas. I'm from Kansas. My phone's from Kansas, but I'm in Ohio right now, so.
Sorry about that. What's on your mind?
It's cool. Oh, nothing. I was just
Hello, Ohio.
Yeah, I'm actually working at the Northeastern Ohio Medical University for the Public Safety Office. I'm on my way into work, and I was catching the show on the way. So, but,
awesome.
No, I wanted to weigh in on this case and all that. I was listening. That case has got personal written all over it. Definitely got personal written all over it. I definitely don't think it was the kiosk guy, because he's got a wife and all that kind of stuff. What's he doing out there at 4 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
To me, this seems like something. What happened was, old boy, they had too many drinks. Old boy got really, really pissed drunk. Probably a little bit violent. He probably had it out with the other boy, whose girlfriend probably accepted him or whatever. He leaves the tent for a little while, takes a little walk, maybe has a few more drinks, gets a little bit more worked up or whatever. Goes into his knapsack, gets a knife, and goes to town. So probably maybe inflicting some injuries upon himself, during the process, or hell, he might have ran from the tent and tripped or bonked into a tree or something like that,
Right.
So, but no, to me it's sloppy. He said that he thought that the killer was drunk, probably because he was the one that was drunk.
Right.
So
yeah, that point,
he did admit that most of the liquor was gone.
Yeah, that's because he drank it. And those two boys that came and saw the campsite, either like right after or what have you, claimed they didn't see him, probably because he was busy hiding the evidence, the murder weapons, and all that good stuff. It ain't that much for you to quickly dig a hasty hole and chunk that evidence in there and cover it up right quick, But he might have just been thinking about that and completely forgot about his shoes that he left in the woods somewhere. So
yeah, it seems like he. Well, he just seems like he went crazy, wielding, killed them. To me, I think the first thing that you do is sort of you run away from the scene because you don't want to associate with it. You want to get away from there, and so he may have ran off. Maybe that's wherever they found the shoes at. Maybe he ran to that area and that location, thought about what he did, and he's like, "Oh shit, you know what? I got to cover this up.
Yeah.
I can't be bound of this." And so, that's when he may have went into action mode and, started to hit himself and throw himself around and, make it look like, he was a victim as well and planted himself near the campsite as well.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, because his testimony, that's got bullet holes written all over it, except for the whole, I do remember that he was drunk. I mean, would you give him a breathalyzer prior to coming into the tent to kill everybody? That doesn't make any sense to me. He's saying that he thought the guy was drunk because he was the one that was drunk that was doing all the killing.
Right.
So, yeah, I definitely don't think it was the kiosk guy. That's just that's too. Why would you sit there and say, "Oh, I hate these kids, and then one day finally go out there and kill them all at 4:00 in the morning of all times of the day, complete strangers to you, and then continue to have your kiosk and all that?" I don't know. That one doesn't make any sense to me. What makes the most sense is old boy got jealous and drunk and did something stupid, and police just didn't catch on until 44 years later, which I think that's kind of amazing right there. 44 years later.
Right.
Well, I was just
and then found him not guilty.
But do you feel that this case was properly investigated?
No, absolutely not. I'll bet you $1 million they didn't drag the lake or anything like that. They didn't, use any type of resources to locate any further evidence or look for the murder weapons or anything. I'll bet you the murder weapons are probably
still there,
feet away from that campsite. I'll bet you they're right there, dug. They're buried in a hole someplace, and just it never occurred to anybody to look. Try to find them or anything like that. They went out and picked up the usual suspects, and which back in the day, that's the kind of thing that they did. They went out and they looked for the people that were the scourge of the neighborhood or whatnot, that had a history of things, and they kind of zeroed in on them, and it never really occurred to them that the monster was right there the whole time. So. I mean, that's just the way a lot of cases were handled back in the day, where it was the usual suspects. It wasn't the guy, the perceived victim or anything like that. It was they're already picked out. So No, I don't think that the case was handled properly, and I think by 2004 it was probably a little bit too late to play catch-up.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so much you can bring forward 44 years later.
Yep.
Well, Jeremy, thank you for calling in. I'm curious, have you gone any, or do you have any new investigations coming up?
You know, working at this area that I'm at, it's quite interesting. It's got a lot of history and all that, and I'm trying to dig up some more information about it. Again, the Northeastern Ohio Medical University is a very, very fascinating place, very interesting. But yeah, I'll let you know. I've heard different rumors about the area. I haven't had any. I work mid-shift over here, and I haven't had any experiences. And believe me, I've been out kind of exploring around, trying to see if I can, dig something up, and I really haven't. Anthony, you made a comment on Mike and Mateo's show a while ago that you thought Ohio was pretty much the most haunted state that you'd ever been to, and you would totally be right to think that.
Oh, yes.
I've been in several different places that I'm just like, wow, I haven't had any personal experiences yet, but I mean, that's, that I'm sure it's going to happen sooner or later. So yeah, there's a lot of places around here that are just really got a lot of history and really, really spooky. So I'll definitely keep you guys informed. So I got to let you guys know the rest of the stuff that happened to me during my military experience and all that. I know we kind of got cut short with that the last time I was on your show. So, but I'd love to play catch up on that sometime.
Definitely. We'll have Lucy reach out to you, and we'll set up a date for you to come back on the show again.
Roger that. That'd be great, man. I'd love that. And well, anyway, I got to get in here, so.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks for calling in, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right,
thanks,
guys,
Jeremy.
I'll talk to you later. Bye, Lucy.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Ohio, I'm telling you, people. I want to live in Ohio. I love it so much.
I need to find some place in Ohio soon because I need to go investigating.
I don't know if I can do another 10-hour drive, but I love Ohio. If you can find a great place to go to, I'll go there in a heartbeat. I want to move to Ohio. I think it's, I don't know. I don't want to get off topic, but I think it's sort of the crossroads of paranormal. Love it. Anyway, so is this case eerily similar to Friday the 13th movie?
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
you've got everything. You've got the lake. You've got a knife wielding killer. We don't know who did it. Well, I think we know who did it, but the whole situation, yes, I think it's very similar.
One of the perpetrators or possible candidates of being the murderer killed himself in the lake, the actual lake of where this happened. I mean, it's kind of funny almost. I don't mean to make light of this case, but it's just really strange when I caught on to it and thought, this is Friday the 13th. This is Jason Voorhees. Very cool.
Yes, it's very, very close, and it's very creepy, and I feel so bad for these victims, and whoever really did it, theirs is coming.
Wait, I want to do one more thing before we continue on with the show. Lucy, what were we trying to pronounce before coming on?
No.
One of the phrases that obviously is notorious for Friday the 13th is having a fear of Friday the 13th, and so there's a phobia name associated with it. I mean, if you actually go to, I think it's phobia.com or phobia.org or something like that, there's a list of any and every type of phobia you can think of. I mean, there's a fear of fear. There's a fear of sun. There's a fear of socks. There's a fear of just anything that you can think of, and it's actually pretty funny to go through the list. But, Lucy, what is the pronunciation of the fear of Friday the 13th?
I knew you were going to do this to me. It is called paraskevidaecatriophobia.
Ah! Wonderful. I couldn't have said that.
Now you say it.
Couldn't. paraskevidikatriophobia. It took us 20 minutes to learn how to say that.
I know. You should have heard the first time I tried.
We should have recorded it then.
It is on my recorder.
Well, there you have it. Friday the 13th, 13, and the infamous, still unsolved case of the Bodom Lake murders in Finland of 1960, all related somehow to this day that we celebrate today, Friday the 13th. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it was interesting, educational. You got a laugh or two, and maybe it sparked an interest in actually going further and researching the whole idea of whether or not this idea of this phenomena of 13 and Friday is, first, was it based in religion, and two, is it all about control? Is there some sort of meaning behind the reason why Friday or the 13 number has outlasted for hundreds of years to where we are today, 2016, where we still believe in superstitions. As crazy and as silly as some of them are, we still do believe in them, and we hold dear to our heart. So I hope tonight was interesting for you guys, and hope it sparked some interest in going further in it.
So let's get to some business. Let's do the Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week. And this week it is Rob Young of St. Catharines, Ontario. Rob is the newest member of our Paranormal Review Radio Fan group, and we want to thank Rob for listening and representing Canada. Congratulations.
Hey, Rob, congratulations. Thanks so much. And if you guys want to be a fan of the week for Paranormal Review Radio, all you have to do is just like us on Facebook or subscribe to us here on YouTube at Paranormal Review Radio.
Well, it is the end of another Friday the 13th, the only one in 2016. Did you make it without anything bad happening? Whether or not you believe that the day is truly unlucky, or if it's just in our heads, the day's over. Now, put away the rabbit's foot, let the black cat back into the house, and go buy that lottery ticket. Now, have you ever noticed that you might have been visited by a particular animal at one time or another? Has the same bird or deer appeared to you during a moment of quiet? It may just be an animal spirit guide. And just what is an animal spirit guide, and what message do they bring? Dr. Stephen Farmer is a world-renowned author, teacher, shamanic practitioner, and a soul healer. He is the author of several best-selling books. One of the books he has written is called Animal Spirit Guides, an easy-to-use handbook for identifying and understanding your power animals and spirit helpers. Dr. Farmer will be joining us next Friday night to help us understand how these precious beings can help us understand ourselves and the world around us. It's going to be a great conversation, so please don't miss it. Again, we want to thank all of you out there. No matter where you listen or watch, you're more than just listeners. You're family to us. Thank you, Anthony, for being the brains of the operation. So, until next week, Parapeeps, keep that third eye open and have a paranormal week. Good night.
Happy Friday the 13th.
Paranormal Review Radio.